Hello everyone! We are back on our journey through a story of a realm reborn. Last time we spent the time looking for Lahabrea, but had not as much success as we would have liked. Sadly, we have no new leads, but it doesn't mean that we can take a break, because apparently there are some issues happening around Limsolominsa. This time we learn around Limsolominsa, the kobolds are being a little bit uppity. Now, this isn't really out of the blue. The kobolds and the Limsolominsans have had a pretty bad relationship for a long time. You see, the island of Ilbrand, where Limsolominsa is located, is actually the home of the kobolds. They were there first, and then all of these people just showed up and made a home there. And the kobolds who were already living there weren't exactly thrilled, so there was understandably a lot of fighting, but eventually the two sides did come to an accord. They split the island between the kobolds and the humans. Now, the kobolds would own the area around their sacred mountain Ukomoro, up in the northern part of the island. But the Lominsians would hold the southern coast and plains of La Nosca, where they could have their farms and build their city. And with that came a relatively fragile peace, but at least peace. And this was going really well until, well, the calamity came. And it really changed the landscape of Ilbrand, both geographically but also politically. Merlwe Blufusvin, the admiral of Limsolominsa, changed the law around piracy, making piracy illegal. This came simply because the Garleans were about to invade Eorzea, and no city-state wanted to be without allies. And it's really hard to make allies if you are robbing them. Now, if you want to know a little bit more about the origin of Limsolominsa, where I cover this a little bit more, I do have a video on it, which you can find in the iCard or in the description. But when piracy was banned, they had to do something with the pirates. They couldn't just leave them without work. So she started this program where pirates could get, well, work on land. And actually many captains and their crew would turn to farming. But there's not unlimited amount of farming land in the area that belonged to Limsolominsa. So they expanded a little bit up into the kobold territory. Now, understandably, the kobolds did not take this well. And now at this time, the kobolds were also kind of struggling, especially with food shortage. So, in retaliation to the Limsolominsans taking part of the land and starting to do some farming there, the kobolds started robbing the farms. So, the Limsolominsians established outposts further into the mountains, and that of course pissed off the kobolds even more, causing them to start working on summoning Titan. And we don't really know much about the origin of Titan or what their story is with him, but Titan is their god, Lord of the Crag, and they plan to use him to get even. And obviously summoning in a primal is gonna completely break the pact, though as Yistola will point out several times through this questline, the Lominsians kinda broke the pact first. All in all, we can just say the pack is pretty busted at the moment, but our job is to fight primals, and the kobolds are about to summon primals, so we gotta do something about it. So we head to Limsolominsa with Yistola. Now her opinion is that it's the Lominsians who are mostly at fault here. After all, the two groups have lived together for so long. By this point, we should have had a good open dialogue and cooperation. But no, we don't. And she is very open about it, even outright scolding the admiral, which is impressive and also pisses off all of her guards. But hey, I am not gonna go up against Yistola. I'll just stand there while she is angry at the big lady. And while Yistola has a point, the admiral also has one where she points out that, well, honestly, they can't just let this though happen now. They can't be expected to just fall on her sword and die. They have to deal with Titan. So the best way to deal with Titan is actually to go talk to the people who fought Titan before, because this isn't the first time Titan has been summoned. He has been summoned before in the wake of the calamity, when the world was pretty much ending for everyone. At the time, there was a group called the Company of Heroes who dealt with Titan, and those are the people we want to find. Except, well, they disbanded, and groups like that don't really keep a record of their members, so finding them can be a little bit tricky. But luckily for us, apparently there is one guy from the group who is living not so far from Limsolominsa. So we are sent out there to go talk to him. His name is Trachtoem, and he claims to have been the company's best axeman, and says that if we help him with some chores, he will regale us with a tale on how they beat Titus. Who the hell is Titus? We try to tell him that, no, we want to know about Titan, but it doesn't really work, so we go do some chores for him. One of the chores is killing a gobu, which we go do, and then go back and ask him to tell us now about Titan and how to beat him. But he doesn't seem too keen on telling us, saying that he is not sure we have what it takes to fight Titus. Again, who the hell is Titus? But as we are pondering that, the owner of the mill comes over, asking if he has dealt with the gobu, or if he's just gotten somebody else to deal with it. I'm getting a really bad feeling this guy might be a scam. Now Trachtoem claims that he killed the gobu, and we did not do it, and he claims that he was part of the company of heroes where they killed Titus. And the miller points out that there is no Titus. They killed Titan. This Titus doesn't exist. But the best way to find out the truth of who killed the gobu is to do it the Lominsian way, which is to beat up a rock. I will never understand Lominsians. Now this trial does not feel fair to me for two reasons. First of all, I'm a white mage. Breaking rocks is not really in my wheelhouse. Second, why is my rock so much bigger? Either way, off we go to beat up the rocks. I am doing a pretty good job. Then Trachtoem starts trying to kill me. Thankfully, all we need to do is just a little bit of dodging, and then we break the rock. The truth comes out. He is not one of the company of heroes. He just likes to lie about it because it gets him attention, and it allows him to skip work. He claims to have learned his lesson and begs to at least get to keep his job. The miller does allow him to stay on, and Trachtoem does give us information that we actually need. He used to work on Costa del Sol, and there was actually a Rogadin who was from the company of heroes. A grizzled murderer who was treated like royalty, and Trachtoem just wanted to be him. So that's where we need to go. We leave the miller to deal with Trachtoem while we head up to Costa del Sol to meet this company of hero guy. And oh, I do love Costa del Sol. Now there, we finally meet a member of the company of heroes named Visket. He still comes with us and explains that what we need to know is how to get to Titan's lair. Because that lair is somewhere deep within Ukamoro, so we need to find the way of how the company of hero got in originally. But Visket is not so keen on just telling us the answer. He tells us that Titan was one of the hardest foes they ever fought. And while they did defeat him eventually, they lost many good men to the fight. So before he will tell us how to get into Titan's lair, he wants to be sure we are not just the run-of-the-mill adventurers. Now, Ysola points out that we don't really have time for any trivial tasks, but Visket is firm in his belief that he needs to test us. And he is the only one who has the information, so we simply have to play along. Which then starts us on one of the sillier side quests of this game. You see, what we need to do is help Visket prepare a banquet. Now what we don't know is this is actually a trial. We are about to meet other members of the company of heroes, who each will task us with a task that is borderline impossible, or at least very dangerous. So first Visket wants us to kill some things, which we do. Then we are sent off to find the man Landanel. He needs us to get the egg from a giant adamantoise. He does also threaten to fashion a noose from my entrails if I tell anybody he was part of the company of heroes. I love this guy. Anyway, we go get the egg. Not too big of a deal. And then we head off to find our next thing. For that we have to find Ordnon, who is the leader of the U tribe. Now you may have noticed that most male miqo'te either have the last name of Non or Tia. If you want to know a little bit more about that, I do have a lore video on the miqo'te that you can check out. What we're doing with him is we are getting some meat for the banquet. And that is meat from some weird as worms. They're out in the desert. So what we have to do is go out to the desert, run around like an idiot until the worm shows up, and kill it. Though before that he did make us kill also an Amalja by using his spear as a lure, just to prove that we could fight the worms. But either way, we do end up with the meat. Now we have egg and we have meat, and next on the list is cheese. For this we have to find Freyflux. Now we were meant to meet up with her to get some cheese, but things have become a little bit more complicated. You see, some beasts have invaded her home and pushed her friends out of it. So we have to go into the Longstop, which is where they live, and bring much handlanding, which I think just means beat up all the enemies so they can move back in. And I absolutely just love the dungeon description, which is, after a tiring journey across Eorzea, it is deep within the quiet jungle of Raincatcher Gully, where the charismatic and enterprising young goblin, Freyflux Alltox, chooses to build her tiny empire. What she does not realize, however, is that something else, something sinister, has also made the lush forest his home. Now driven from their rightful claim, Freyflux and her brethren seek to retake the land, and are not above asking the help of lesser races, that would be you, to help them do so. So in we go to the dungeon and discover the problem is a dragon. So we have to kill the dragon, because, well, we can't have the goblins and the dragon living together. So with cheese in hand, we head back and are told the final things we're gonna need to get is something to drink. So we head to Wineport, where the finest wine in the region is made. And there we meet Shamani Lomani, who is a Lalafell and former member of the Company of Heroes. He is also blind. He tells us that Master Gegeruyu, who is the owner of Costa del Sol, will not settle for just any wine. No, he's gonna need the best wine. And that is gonna be a little bit complicated. You see, part of the issue is all of the best wine is hoarded by Birgland, who is the owner of Wineport. So we have to go and ask him if we could maybe buy off him like one of his vintages. Which he says, of course, no. And tells us to just serve gob urine instead. That's a lovely man. So we go back to Shamani and tell him that his boss is not really cooperating with us. So we must find another approach. Now Shamani tells us part of the issue is the wine made in Wineport is not as good anymore as it used to be, because the grapes they have now are of poor quality. If only we had been here a few years ago, we could have gotten some of the best wine in the area. You see, back then the vignerons of Wineport crossbreeded several species of grape-bearing wine and created an absolutely one-of-a-kind grape, which produced the Bacchus wine, a vintage that surpassed all other. It was the most aromatic, the most complex, the most flavorful of all wines, and it's extinct now. Now the leader of Wineport does have a barrel, but he's not going to give it up, so we have to go and ask others if they happen to have some Bacchus wine for us to buy. So we go talk to the other staff, who obviously do not have the wine we're asking for, because that is some rare-ass wine. Now Shamani says he's going to try to figure out if he can find some suitable wine for us, and while he does that, he asks us to do us a favor. You see, when Shamani lost his sight, he didn't have the best of time, so he became a vagabond drunk who would wander the land looking for a place to die. Honestly, he did find one not too far from Wineport, but as we can see, he's still alive, and that is all because of a man named Drest who took him in and nursed him back to health. And Drest was also the first man to give him the taste of Bacchus wine, which pushed Shamani onto the path he has now, and seek out the arts of winemaking when he had gotten better. And he wants us to go check up on his friend and make sure he's doing okay. Now, while he's not an experienced winemaker yet, he has made a simple wine and he would like to give it to his friend. But, well, Shamani is blind and not really gonna go wandering through the forest, so he asks us to make the delivery instead. We find Drest out in his cabin in the forest, where he seems to be struggling with the life of it a little bit. Turns out the man can't sleep because there are flies about that are just really loud. The midges keep on buzzing all night and they keep him awake. So he asks us to go deal with the midges, which we do, running around outside his cabin and killing all the flies we can find. And honestly, there's a lot of flies here. As we return, he is so grateful and says he's surprised that we would help him after all his people did to the country. And this is when we realize that he used to work for the Garleans. Not by choice, mind you. His nation was taken over by the Garleans like so many other, and he was forced into the army. And when he was out on a reconnaissance mission in this area, the maelstrom caught up with his group, and he was the only one who made it out alive. So he decided to just live here in the forest. And he is grateful for us for bringing the wine and said that he also is making some by collecting the sap from the nearby palm trees, placing it in coconut shells, and storing it for a few bells. And apparently it makes for a fine wine, and should be ready by now. So we have to take the wine to Shamani as thanks. Shamani thanks us for helping his friend, and as he plans to open up a coconut, he realizes something. The shells are sealed up with a leaf that has a very distinct shape and an odor. And these turn out to be the leaves of the Bacchus grapevine, meaning the Bacchus vine does not have to be extinct, it's just we have to find out where the leaves come from. So we rush back to the rest asking him where did you find the leaves that you used to stuff up the coconuts? He tells us he did find them not far away from his home, and he just used it because it was pretty. He didn't see any grapevines around where he found the leaf, though we did see some gobu tracks. Now there is a possibility the vines are actually growing on the back of the gobu. So we head out chasing down a gobu in the forest, who may or may not be accidentally growing some vine leaves on his back. And lo and behold, it is. We take some cuttings of the gobu and take them back to Vineport, and as Shamani is loudly proclaiming about our discoveries, Birglan comes over, asking what nonsense is going on, that a simple adventurer and a novice vintner could manage to restore the Bacchus vine. But as soon as he sees the grapevine, he knows it's the truth. And Shamani, being much nicer person than I would ever be, gives this to his boss, telling him that with this they can restore the Bacchus vineyard. Because Birglan has the resources, the knowledge and the passion to do it. So Shamani thinks it would be selfish to keep the cutting. I think Shamani should go and make his own vineyard somewhere. But he wants to stay here and rebuild Vineport into the winemaking powerhouse it used to be. Birglan is impressed that Shamani cares so much about their craft. He promises to not squander this gift, and he promises that in few years, every tavern across Eorzea will be clamoring for a cask of Vineport legendary Bacchus wine. But for now he feels a payment is due. He hands Shamani a bottle. It is one of the final Bacchus wines in existence, 1547 Bacchus to be specific, and Birglan admits that this was the jewel of his collection. He has debated opening it for years, that maybe today or tomorrow would be the ideal time. But now he realizes that this wine was never meant for him. It was meant for the savior of Vineport. We take it back to Weiscat, handing him the wine, and he tells us that our prolonged absence has started to worry him. And then he is impressed and understanding of why we took so long when he realized we brought basically an extinct wine to the banquet. And with this, we will be able to host the most luxurious feast Costa del Sol has ever seen. And then he asks us to tell Yistola about the banquet being about to begin because she is apparently getting a little bit annoyed. Now as we speak to her, the Lalafell owner of Costa del Sol comes running over and variably destroys his knees in apology to us. He says that if he had known who we truly were, he would never have permitted this. And just then, Weiscat comes in with all of his friends, claiming that surely we would have figured out what was happening. Claiming that, of course, he would never send us running back and forth across the Eorzea for a banquet. And, well, that's what he did, didn't he? Now, Yistola points out that honestly we're unlikely to know. He only figured out recently what was happening, and we are wholly unaware of the traditions of this area. So Weiscat decides to explain. You see, when the company of heroes disbanded, these five decided that whoever would follow in the tracks would have to be measured and judged by them, not by their reputation, but by their deeds. Each one would judge the person in their own way, and if any of them would find you wanting, well, then he wouldn't get what he wanted. But if you were to prove yourself worthy, they swore to help you in any way they could. They did this because they know there are plenty of souls out there who want to do the right thing and save the world, but if they do not have the strength of character or skill to fight somebody like Titan, and they are simply sending waves after waves of people to their death. And we have been tested, and we have been found fitting. We have been found to be brave, be able to stalk our prey. Shamani sees us as a kind and generous soul, and Bravelux believes we are a talented plan maker. And for that reason, we have been judged a worthy challenger to cast down the Lord of Crags. Finally, by this point, the Lord of Crags might just as well have walked into Limsalomilsa, because this took a while. And with that, they decide to celebrate. The banquet is ready, and this banquet is actually for us. We are to celebrate the birth of a new legend. Us, the Titan's Bane. So we spend the evening dancing, eating, and having some fun, until finally we are told where to go. We must go to Bronze Lake in Upper Lanoska. There we must find a man named Riol, who once served with the company, and he knows how to get to Titan. Now, Bronze Lake is a lovely place. It is a bath area where people who are injured or tired go to rest and recover. We find Riol there, and he tells us how to get to Titan. You see, when they originally planned to go in, they started thinking about how to get to Titan, and they came up with the same dilemma as we have. Going through the tunnels would be madness. So many goblins, so many complex and long tunnels. But then they started thinking, well, in every city there are Aetherites. And apparently what they did, they found a Sherlayan scholar who helped them travel from an Aetherite they found outside to the Aetherite inside near the Lord of Crags. And apparently they said that any Sherlayan scholar worth their salt would be able to do it. Now, Histola is a Sherlayan scholar, and she is not one to back down from a challenge. So we go to the Aetherite the company of heroes used in the past. Now she believes the signal of it is not strong enough to be used easily, but she believes with her own energy amplifying it, she should be able to send us to the correct place. Though she will have to stay behind to supplement the beacon's power, otherwise we're going to be stuck inside, which would also be unfortunate. And we are sent in to deal with the Lord of Crags. Now as we come in, there are so many kobolds around, and there is no Titan, but that doesn't last very long. Now as we stand there, the kobolds start praying, using their crystal to summon up the Lord of Crags himself. And we are forced to fight him. It is not easy, but eventually we take him down, and he leaves behind a crystal. It is yet another crystal for our collection. Though unbeknown to us, we were not alone in here. Nero is up there, again taking measures of the fight. With him is another man named Ritatin and Lahabrea. They seem to be talking about some device that's going to help them win the war. And it turns out the Garleans seem to be working with the Asians. And as Lahabrea leaves, we learn that while we did not notice him, he did not go unnoticed. Shistola, who had made her way inside, saw the Asian and the Garleans talking together, though she cannot figure out what common goal they might possibly have. After all, when we think about it, Asians want to summon primals, while Garleans really do not want primals to be summoned. But when Asians are involved, they are usually manipulating people and getting their own way, somehow. So it's curious what they're up to. Yistola helps us get out, and we head back to Camp Bronze Lake. Titan has been defeated, so for now Limsalomilsa is gonna be safe. So to celebrate and rest after a hard day's work, we settle in the hot springs and enjoy the evening, even though we do have a thunderstorm going on. And that was the story of us fighting Titan. If you want to make sure to see future retellings of our story, make sure to subscribe and do all the good YouTube stuff. And if you want to be the best warrior of light, make sure to share this video with somebody. But for now, thank you so much for watching, and whatever you do, I hope you have a lovely day.